Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind Your Mental, a podcast that seeks to educate, empower, and uplift those seeking guidance through the monumental world of mental health. I'm your host, Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health clinician. Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and I hope you enjoy it. So, first episode, guys. I am so flipping excited. My name's Raquel Martin again, and I'm just going to use this first episode to introduce myself. So, if you've never heard of me before, I previously co-hosted a podcast called The Black Unconscious, which you can still look up and look at our previous episodes, but we will no longer be working together, myself and Dr. Hopkins. So, I decided to start this project with myself. Same topics, mental health, but I also wanted to talk about things that are important to me. That may be important to you as well, like what's going on in the media that's starting to be triggering, or just venting so that you can understand my experience that I go through every single day in my life. So I am a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology. I will be graduating in May, though, so that is very exciting. I focus on child and adolescent psychology. I'm studying to be a child psychologist. So I work with children, adolescents, and families. I really, really love my job. It is really like a great and amazingly fulfilling experience. And I primarily work in community mental health. So I am currently a pre-doctoral intern at Johns Hopkins Kennedy Krieger Institute, and I'll be doing my postdoctoral fellowship at Johns Hopkins Kennedy Krieger, but I'll be working in the Center for Family and Traumatic Stress. What else about me? From Philly, and I'm also currently residing in Maryland area. And yeah, I just wanted this podcast to be something fun that I could do, but also informative. So I feel like the biggest thing with minority mental health and working as a clinician that I see is that so many people aren't really aware of certain mental health difficulties, so certain mental health triggers, when it's time to see a mental health clinician, what are some coping skills they can use at home, things like that. So I really want this podcast to be a place for that. I also am not like serious most of the time. So I also want a podcast to talk about things in the media that can be triggering, whether it is triggering annoying or triggering like, what the heck are these people talking about? For example, we may have episodes about things that have just happened recently. By the time you see this, it might be a little bit later, but like the R. Kelly interview and all these memes popping up about how absurd he's acting when he's standing up over a woman. That's ridiculous. But it can also be triggering for a lot of people, right? Like you never know what someone's experience can be with an overbearing individual, particularly a male. And I think it's interesting to see how many people have reacted to that, right? Like so many people have made memes that just state that this is just what we're used to as women. People are saying like, how did Gail keep her composure? And other people are saying, of course she kept her composure because she had to keep her job. Like she has to, but he doesn't have to. So things like that will be fun to talk about. I also want to focus on coping skills a lot more. So it's great to talk about like all the difficult things in life. It's always very freeing to understand that someone is going through the same thing that you're going through. But I also think it's very helpful to talk about coping and talk about how to deal with it. It's one thing to focus on the negative, but let's focus on the positive too and talk about how do we get over the depression? How do we get over the anxiety? I also plan on having so many guests, and I'm very excited about this experience to have more people on to talk about their expertise. I focus on child and adolescent psych and family psych and community mental health and minority health disparities, but there are so many different topics that I think could be brought in to have like a great discussion. Like relationships is something that's always just very freeing to talk about, and not just romantic relationships, right? Like we have relationships with ourselves. We have relationships with friends and family, and they're always something that's going to be integral in our life, but they can also be pretty difficult, right? So I'm going to talk about stuff like that. And hopefully I'll get questions from people, from listeners, and we can talk about those things, whether it's just about how to deal with my annoying boss, or whether it's like, how do I know when it's time to get rid of someone in my life? How do I know when someone is being toxic? How do I know when to take a break? How do I know when, I don't know, to go to the gym instead of like eating that 5th slice of pizza? I don't know. I'm just saying that because I'm thinking of pizza. But these are all like various topics that will be talked about in the podcast. I chose the name Mind Your Mental because it reminded me of monumental, and I want the podcast to be monumental. And also, like, it sounded kind of like mind your business, and I feel like a lot of times people don't want to talk about their mental health because they don't want someone all up in their business. So I like the idea of mind your mental because, you know, my mind is my business, right? Like, wasn't that like a term we said when we were kids? I feel like I did say that when I was a kid, like, my mind is my business, something. I don't know. I had a smart mouth as a kid, and as an adult, I've had a smart mouth my whole life. So yeah, I just really like the idea. This concept is going to be really, really fun. All the listeners from the Black Unconscious, I hope you're coming here to listen to this as well. And I hope we have some new listeners too that will enjoy my take on mental health. Someone who has primarily worked in community mental health, I feel like I have a pretty different perspective on the way mental health is seen by our community. As a Black woman, there's also that aspect of understanding, like, yes, all the books and the knowledge are very helpful, but sometimes it's just easier just to break down what connects with you and what would connect with, you know, your history. As a Black woman, I'm a minority, but also as someone in a PhD program and as someone who's in higher learning, I'm a minority in that sense too, right? Like, the higher I went up in my degree, the less people I saw that looked like me. And it's really hard when you're working in community mental health because some of the complaints and some of the reasons why some individuals don't seek out mental health is because they want to work with someone who looks like them. Now, mind you, that's not always going to be the case. You're not always going to get to work with someone that looks like you. But I do think that we do get a different perspective growing up in this skin, working with individuals of the same skin. Now, I'm not going to say that my experience as a Black woman is the same as any other Black woman's experience, but I will say that when it comes to the cultural competence aspect, there are certain things that have to be lived to be fully understood. Like the trigger of someone following you in a store, or the concern that you have, or the harm and like the punch to the gut you feel the last time you saw someone on TV that looked like your brother or your cousin or your husband getting like taken down. Like, granted, everyone can empathize with this experience, but it's just a different thing because with Black people, I think we are a community. It's difficult because I think our community was severed for quite some time, but I think we're actually starting to come more and more together. And it's sad that it took these really difficult things to bring us back together, but I do think we are starting to get closer. So those are the kind of things I'm going to be talking about. So tune in to the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. If you do enjoy it, leave a review, subscribe, leave a comment on our Facebook, on our Instagram, on all the social media. If you don't like it, leave a comment too so I can see what you didn't like about it. And that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our next episode is going to be about values. I find values to be really important because they drive every single aspect of your life. And I think it will be important to talk about that and the way it's driven my life and how it can help you live like a more, I don't want to say straight and narrow, but living according to your values can honestly help you get out of a lot of conflicts. If something doesn't align with your value, you can kind of just make a pretty quick choice to be like, I'm not going to do this because this isn't who I am as a person. So I think that's it for the first episode. Once again, my name is Raquel Martin. I am going to be the host of the show. We will have guests on periodically, but for the next couple episodes, it's probably going to be just me. So get used to hearing my voice, and thanks for tuning in.